Really happened. I saw it with my own eyes. Maybe it didn't happen as I see it, but more on that later. So me, and 3 friends from university were planning to go out camping. One of us, Darren, said his family had a cabin in northeast Wyoming. His grandparents used to live there, now they're dead and there's no one stopping us from going there. Of course, me, Michael, and Celeste disliked the idea of staying in a cabin. It's a fucking camping trip, we have to go sleep in the wilderness. So Darren told us about the woods near the cabin. I don't remember much about the trip, but I remember we made a couple of racist jokes after seeing a sign about the Black Hills. Michael, who is black, was not happy. The car pulled up outside the cabin. That's practically a mansion, not a cabin, Celeste said. It was 2 floors tall and pretty big, about the width and length of 3 buses put end to end, or maybe less, I'm not good with measurements. Darren went inside to check if the place was still clean. We waited impatiently until he came out and then we lugged our shit down through the forest. Darren had brought along a shotgun, so we weren't too scared of bears or whatever shit, or didn't want to appear scared in front of the others. After we set up the tents we started gathering firewood. That's when I first heard it, some mechanical grinding sound accompanied by a soft murmur. I thought it was a car at first, and I looked around for its source. But the sound died down and I continued picking up wood. I was already feeling lethargic. I returned to the campsite and started the fire. We ate canned food, roasted marshmallows, pretty typical shit. I thought I heard bushes rustling, but it was only a rabbit. Mist rolled in soon, and we were all tired as fuck and wanted to sleep. Darren was annoyed. The hell? There was never any mist when I was growing up. We told him to shut up and we stuffed our shit into the tents while the mist thickened. I got inside one tent, followed by Michael. Celeste and Darren went in the other. I couldn't sleep, though, because of a slow drone which I first attributed to insects. After about half an hour it became obvious that the sound was the same I'd heard earlier. I also heard thumping noises, one loud one followed by a soft slithery noise, and then a slightly softer one. It wasn't rocket science to figure out that someone was walking around outside. I at first thought it was Darren, and opened the tent flaps to tell him to stop it. The mist got in the tent almost immediately. I could make out a dark shape crouching at the other tent. I shuffled towards it. Turns out Darren had heard the noise too. We stared at each other nervously while the footsteps continued. We agreed that there was nothing we could do now and I went back inside my tent, nervously fingering the knife Darren had provided me with before we arrived. Maybe it was some native tribesman, or a crazed psychopath, or a fucked up animal. The footsteps stopped after a while, and I was pretty relieved. Silence for a few minutes. Then the sound, murmuring and mechanical grinding started up over again. It was loud enough that I could make out what the murmuring was. It seemed to be children chanting. Coming from right outside our tent. I snatched up the knife and tried to open the tent flap, but it got stuck. I wasted some time untangling my hand, and then I heard a low, raspy laugh and an unintelligible mutter. I opened the tent flaps. There was nothing there. I looked around and noticed that someone had scratched a picture into the ground, a childish-looking picture of a face. It was becoming too spooky for me to handle at that point. I woke Michael up and told him about the situation. We agreed we had to leave. I started shoveling the essentials into a bag while Michael woke up Darren and Celeste. We all had torchlights, but they were faulty or something. Switching them on in the mist resulted in only a faint glow. Darren cursed and started to lead the way, stumbling around. "What if you get lost?" Michael asked. "I won't. I've been on this trail thousands of times." After about 10 minutes of walking it became painfully obvious Darren didn't have a fucking clue where he was going. He was swearing and looking all around. Eventually he led us down a narrow path until we bumped into something. I saw several stone blocks, arranged in precise patterns. Each of the blocks had carvings on them, and in the middle was a particularly large block with a large symbol, an inverted triangle combined with another triangle within a circle. It wasn't a pentagram, but it looked somewhat similar. Fuck it. This wasn't here. Let's turn back, Darren snapped, and we obeyed. Why is there a fucking huge ant mound in the middle of the forest? Celeste asked. Michael said she was blind if she thought that was an ant mound, he'd seen an archway or something. I pitched in. Darren said he'd seen metal spikes rising from the ground. We started arguing, convinced the mist was playing tricks on us. Darren wanted to return and prove what he'd seen. Eventually Celeste told us to shut up and keep going. We head in a straight line. Darren claimed to be navigating by landmarks. I hoped he was right. I kept looking behind me. I was having that feeling where you think someone's watching you or stalking you. I nearly tripped over Celeste when she fell. She shook her head and got to her feet. The ground was muddy as fuck, and it was getting even mistier. If not for the torchlight I wouldn't have any idea who she was. I grabbed her hand, more to ensure we didn't get lost than as a gesture of affection, and pulled her along as Darren got more and more distant. I recognize that tree. Darren shouted. We're getting to the cabin. I again had the feeling that something was watching me. My gut was screaming at me that something, somewhere, was wrong. I realized that the droning sound was back, softer, but still present. I started looking around, panicking. Did a head count, or more accurately, silhouette count. Me. Celeste, still holding my hand. Darren, in the lead. Michael, to the left. Who the fuck was the guy besides Michael? My grip on Celeste's hand tightened and I quickened my pace. I thought about shouting out, but I was worried that if I did the thing would turn and jump Michael or something. I didn't know what to do. I ran my fingers along the handle of my knife. Then the cabin appeared, out of nowhere. The mist was starting to disintegrate around us, and it was now possible to make out who everyone was. Darren, with his shotgun. Michael, who was the only black guy around. I looked at the thing next to Michael. She looked just like Celeste. Do I look like I made it up? The thing whose hand I was holding leaned in front of me. It wasn't Celeste. It was like a mannequin version of her that had been deformed. Hair was straggly and long, shadowing her face. Eyes were bloodshot and glowing. Mouth was, fuck, mouth gives me nightmares even now. Fucking wide and much bigger than it should be, bared in a fucked up grin. It looked almost as though someone had turned it on its side. There were fucking holes all over its fucking face, and I swear I saw worms wriggling around in there or something. I should have run or screamed, but my body was clenching up for no reason. The thing turned and walked into the mist. I caught up with the others as they entered the house, practically in fucking tears. They couldn't find the car and were arguing about where he put it. I ranted about what I'd seen in the forest and they didn't believe me until they heard the droning noise again. Darren kicked the door shut and locked it. We backed away as we heard a thumping noise against the walls. Michael was whimpering. Everything went quiet for a while, then I heard the most horrifying sound I'd ever heard. It was like a group of children had started humming, then halfway through decided to start screaming. We fled the room. I wasn't thinking straight and separated from the others. I ended up in the kitchen. There was a window there, closed. I saw Michael walking outside and was about to call for him when he turned and I saw his jaw hanging all the way to chest level. He started walking towards the window and I pulled the blinds down. For a brief second there was panic. I bumped into someone and was fucking scared it was the shapeshifter, but then Michael swore and punched me. I'd never been so glad to be punched. We groped around for the light switch. It was still on. There was a dripping sound and my hair felt sticky as water dripped on it. "The ceiling's leaky," I complained. Darren stumbled over and held out his hand to feel the dripping. It stopped. Celeste hit the light switch off and on. The lights came back on. The lights in the room directly adjacent, the kitchen, went off. We could hear the dripping again, but from the kitchen. I wondered if the light bulbs were melting or something. Darren told us to follow him upstairs. The kitchen lights went back on and the ones in the stairway leading to what I assumed was the basement went off. Things were so screwed by then that no one questioned what was going on. We went up the stairs. That was when the shit started piling up. An inexplicable sense of nausea and horror suddenly hit me. I suddenly felt revolted by the walls and repulsed by my friends. I lingered at the back. Celeste dropped to the floor and threw up, before collapsing there. Michael turned as if to help her, then his knees buckled and I watched as he collided with the wall, then slowly dragged himself away. I could hear Darren's footsteps. I hit the floor and gagged, but nothing came out. I kept gagging. The drone was getting louder, with the mechanical grinding now a roar. I felt dizzy, lightheaded, disoriented. I crawled on my hands and knees past Celeste. I remember my fingers brushing hers and wanting to help her, but too scared of something I couldn't see. The corridors started swimming in weird colors. It was like I was tripping out while on a high fever. I felt fucking cold, but at the same time my body felt as if it was burning. I remembered a Wikipedia article I'd once read about paradoxical undressing. I wondered if that would be my fate. I managed to make it to one bedroom. The sound died down to a drone once more. I pulled myself to the bed and collapsed on it. I couldn't sleep and wouldn't have if I could. I just wanted to rest. I waited for the world to stop spinning, then I pulled myself upright. I looked out of the window. Darren was looking right back at me. He was crouched in a tree, with his head tilted to one side and his tongue lolling out. His tongue was unnaturally long. I stared back, not being able to register what was going on. The next moment, he was right fucking at the window. He didn't jump or anything. He was in the tree one moment, at the window the next. I noticed that his eyes were small beads, sunken into his head. His tongue had holes, and in the holes were worms. He pressed his face against the glass. I pulled the blinds down as the children humming and screaming noise begun. I pulled out the knife and briefly entertained the thought of attacking the creature when the noise stopped. I cautiously pulled up the blinds. The glass had turned black, inky black. An imprint of Darren's face was present, mouth twisted grotesquely, eyes gigantic glowing white pits. I prodded it with the knife. It was an unmoving 2D picture. I pulled the blinds down. Celeste came through the door. She looked pale and disheveled. I spun to face her as she threw up on the floor again. I dragged her to the bed and laid her down. She was gasping for air, as if something was suffocating her. I remember thinking some pervert stuff that I shouldn't have been thinking at the time, then reminding myself there was something on the loose. Eventually her breathing became more regular. I asked her where the others were. She shrugged. I heard her voice at the door, "Let me in. Let me in. God. Let me in there." I immediately pulled my knife out and placed it at Celeste's throat. Her eyes grew wide with shock and alarm, but they could have been faked. "What are you doing?" "No. I'm the real one. The one out there, that's the imposter," she insisted. I was kind of in a trance, unsure of what to do and staring down at her. I noticed her hands were moving behind her back. She had a knife there too. I would have stabbed her in self-defense if the voice in the door hadn't changed to become some low, deep, guttural voice. Then it became high-pitched, like a little girl's. I pulled my knife away. Celeste immediately wriggled out from under me and put hers at my throat. Hers was curved and wickedly sharp. It reminded me of a kukri. I just stared at it stupidly, too surprised to respond, when she pulled it away and got off the bed. I snapped myself out of the trance. Now the nausea was returning. I got to the door and opened it. There was nothing there but a trail of black liquid. I thought about the dripping downstairs and realized with dull alarm rather than sharp horror, that it had been causing the light outages, walking above us on the ceiling, with its fluids dripping on us. I ran my hands through my hair, touching all the sticky 11 parts from the liquid, and looked up. The thing was on the ceiling, as expected. It was close to a corner, about to turn. It seemed like an albino white male with fucking long limbs, especially the knees, which bent backwards like a bird's. He had fingers instead of toes and all 20 of them were elongated. He was facing away from me, but its head suddenly swiveled 180 degrees and stared at me. I started choking up, as if suffocated. It was hard to breathe. The thing opened its mouth, slowly and deliberately. I thought it was about to devour me when its tongue snaked out. And that's probably the most fucking terrifying thing up till then. On the tip of the tongue was my face. Like a fucking tumor. Eyes closed, lips upturned in some sort of psycho smile. There's a legend somewhere that when you see your doppelganger you die. I thought of that legend. But then the creature rounded the corner and it was gone. I lost it and followed, vision hazy. My heartbeat suddenly seemed ear-splitting to me. I was stumbling, because my legs somehow seemed unable to coordinate. I suddenly realized that I had come to the top of the staircase without realizing it. I pitched forward and toppled down. Once I lay down at the bottom, my body just seemed to shut down. I couldn't move, couldn't even turn my head. There was something dripping on my back. My eyelids seemed heavy and started closing of their own accords. I saw a white feet with fucking long fingers for toes step into view. When my eyes opened, Celeste was shaking me. She was on the brink of tears and her voice was cracking. Get up. Get up. The fucker was in your skin. The fucker was in your skin. I was naked, somehow, and my head hurt. I was about to ask her what had happened when she started pulling me backwards, towards the door. We toppled out and stumbled towards Darren's car, which was still parked there but in a different location now. I was glad to be alive. The mist had stopped completely. Celeste was downright crying now. She pushed me into the back seat. Michael was there, huddled up, and face buried in his knees. Some clothes stained with blood were besides him. They were mine. I put them on. It was tight changing in a car, but I made it work. Darren immediately stepped on the pedal, but nothing happened. He swore and did it again. I noticed that Celeste was armed with the shotgun. I asked them what was going on. The thing joined us. He looked like you. We got the fuck out of the house and found the car. We were halfway down the road. Then Michael started screaming. I looked at Michael. He had a glazed over look in his eyes. The thing burst out of your clothes and jumped out of the car. Michael had the shotgun. He was firing out of the window. We saw the thing run all the way back to the house. At the motherfucking speed of light. Goddamn. It was in my skin? Yeah. I looked down at myself. I wondered if I had been possessed or if worse, the thing had cut off my skin and worn it like a coat. I shuddered at the thought or anything crawling around in my skin. I turned to Michael and asked if he was all right. The thing talked to me. I asked him about what, he didn't respond, just kept huddled up there. I realized he was sobbing. The car jolted into motion. Darren fist pumped as the car started accelerating. I turned back towards the cabin and saw the albino thing standing on the roof of the house, watching us. I shuddered and turned back. Celeste screamed. The thing was in front of the car, crouched on the windshield. It opened its mouth and my tongue face slithered out. Celeste fired the shotgun. The glass shattered and it was thrown backwards. Darren shrieked and I saw blood coming from his face. Something pierced my face and I realized it was glass. The car skidded to a stop. The car doors opened, without any discernible reason, and I fell out. I don't know how long I lay there, body disobeying my commands to move. Darren said at least 5 minutes. Celeste disagreed, saying she came in less than a minute. It felt like hours. The thing lay directly across from me, eyes closed, as if it was sleeping. I wished I could close my eyes. Its mouth hung open and I saw myself again emerging. I didn't move or say anything. Because I couldn't. My face looked at me and started to talk. I love you. I love you. I love you. It said it over and over again, occasionally mixing in I want to be you. It was coming close to me. I wondered if it was going to bite me to death. The thing's eyes shot open and I realized that it was going to kiss me. I managed to regain some control and instinctively twisted back from it. I guess that was what saved me. There was a sound like an explosion and blood spouted from the thing. Celeste was standing over it. Her face and body were bleeding and she had this spaced out, psychopathic look in her eyes. She had just fired the shotgun. My face looked directly at me. I am you, it whispered. She fired again and I saw my own face begin rotting to nothing more than a skeleton in front of me. The thing's head flowered open. That's the best word I can find to describe it. Its head kind of split and split again, peeling away. I saw faces, lots of them, all on the inside of its head. I think I saw Celeste and Michael's faces. They were singing. They were the source of the children's hums, singing and screaming. In the center, where the brain should be, there was a single, red, cat-like eye that was rotating in its socket, and producing the mechanical grinding sound. Celeste fired one last time. The thing sort of withered away, becoming wrinkled and smaller and rotten, until it just disappeared. Celeste dropped the shotgun. I started twitching and spasming as control of my body returned to me. Eventually I stood up. We got into the car silently. Darren was bleeding too, but no one said anything. We drove back to the city in silence. We explained away the damaged car as being attacked by some crazy thieves. We had our shit patched up. Michael was still in a PTSD-like state. I hear he was like that for a while. When I asked him what he thought of the incident later, he denied it ever happened, with compelling conviction. I don't know if he forced himself not to remember or if he genuinely knows nothing of it. Darren insists I got the location wrong and that it was actually near to Yellowstone, while Celeste says we're both wrong and it was near the south. I know what I saw, but I can't remember the exact place. That happened 2 months ago. We still refrain from talking about it. If you were expecting some huge twist or something, you'd be disappointed. I still don't know what we met out there. I don't want to know, actually. I still have nightmares about my own face, rotting away, shouting I am you. I know for sure I'm not fucking going camping ever again.
RD rumors about them, but that's all. You reminded me of the scariest thing that's happened to me so far. I guess maybe I've tried so long to forget about it that it just didn't come to mind right away. As someone who spends literally all of their time in the woods, you don't ever want to let yourself get scared of being alone, or out in the middle of nowhere. That's why when you have experiences like this, you tend to just forget about them and move on. This is, to date, the only thing that's ever made me really seriously consider if this job is the right one for me. I don't really like talking about it much, but I'll do the best I can to remember it all. As I recall, this took place right at the end of spring. It was a typical lost child call. A 4-year-old girl had wandered away from her family's campsite, and had been missing for about 2 hours. Her parents were completely despondent, and told us what most parents do: my kid would never wander away, she's so good about staying close, she's never done anything like this before. We assure the parents that we'll do everything we can to find her, and we spread out in a standard search formation. I was partnered with one of my good buddies, and we were sort of casually holding conversation while we hiked. I know it sounds callous, but you do sort of become desensitized when you've done this long enough. It becomes the norm, and I think to a certain extent you have to learn to desensitize yourself in order to work this job. We search for a good 2 hours, going well beyond where we think she'd be, and we come out of a small valley when something makes us both stop in unison. We freeze and look at each other, and there's almost a sensation like a plane depressurizing. My ears pop, and I have this odd sensation of having dropped about 10 feet. I start to ask my buddy if he felt that, but before I can, we hear the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. It's almost like a freight train passing directly by us, but it's coming from every direction at once, including above and below us. He screams something to me, but I can't hear him over this deafening roar. Understandably freaked out, we look all around us, trying to find the source of the sound, but neither of us sees anything. Of course, my first thought is a landslide, but we're not near any cliffs, and even if we were, it would have hit us by now. The sound goes on, and we're trying to yell to each other, but even standing close together we can't hear anything but this sound. Then, as suddenly as it starts, it stops, like someone threw a switch and cut it off. We stand there for a second, perfectly still, and slowly the normal sounds of the woods come back. He asks me what the fuck just happened, but I just kind of shrug, and we stand there looking at each other for a minute. We're about halfway back when my buddy stops and shines his light to the right of us, into a really thick deadfall, or group of dead trees. I ask him if he's heard a response, but he just tells me to be quiet a second and listen. I do, and in the distance, I can hear what sounds like a kid crying. We both call the girl's name and listen for any kind of response, but it's just this really faint crying. We head in the direction of this deadfall and go around it, calling her name over and over. As we get closer to the crying, I start getting this weird feeling in my gut, and I tell my buddy that something isn't right. He tells me he feels the same way, but we can't figure out what it is. We stop where we are, and call the girl's name again. And at the same time, we both figure it out. The crying is on a loop. It's the same little hitching sob, then wail, then quiet hiccup, repeated over and over. It's exactly the same every time, and without saying another word, we both take off running. It's the only time I've ever lost my composure like that, but something about it was so incredibly wrong, and neither of us wanted to stay out there anymore. When we got back to the rendezvous, we asked if anyone else had heard anything strange, but no one else knew what we were talking about. I know it sounds sort of anticlimactic, but that call fucked me up for a long time. As for the little girl, we never found a trace of her. We keep an eye out for her, and all the other people who we've never found, but frankly I doubt we'll ever find anything. I posted about this in one of the old threads. I was at Fort Lewo in 2010/2011. We did training in those woods too. I talked about how our drill sergeants told us not to wander around at night, we had to radio in for a DS escort to the bathroom, etc. All the DSs have live M4 carbines. We have shitty beater M16A3s and blanks. I never told the story about the odd shit that happened to us on Nightland NAV out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere in those woods. Nightland navigation is when you walk around in the woods at night in full battle rattle and look for certain pre-decided points that each have a code word. Different groups get different points, so every group has their own phrase, that way you can't cheat. Sent Innawoods with my squad for night NAV course. Squad consists of myself, Buddy Walters, one of the only two worthwhile blacks in our company, and this 30-something Air Force sergeant who went from E6 to E5 and had to redo basics since he was AFNG. Course starts right after sundown, it's February so like 7 to 8 p.m. maybe. Spend forever wandering through the woods. Get to our first point, and begin hiking toward the second. Tell Blackie to let me know when his pace speeds hit 3 kilometers. Hike for a while. Sergeant Chairforce takes the map. Everyone kinda zoned out. At some point cross a stream. Ask to see map, it was a mini map of only a few grid squares. There is no stream on the map. Ask Blackie what his pace count was at. Oh fuck, I forgot I was supposed to be tracking. Fuck. Near a large hill/spur, unsure which. Start going up this deer trail. Suddenly Sergeant Chairforce grabs me by the collar and pulls me backwards. I am sleep deprived, hungry, and super stressed. I know very mad and start to yell. He makes a shushing motion and looks very serious, and points. There is a tripwire going between two saplings on either side of the trail. He brushes away some dead leaves carefully. Hear him say holy shit softly. There's an 81mm mortar, first post pick, buried in the soft dirt. We have a quiet and intense discussion on A, what to do now, and B, where exactly we fucking are. Decide to try and back azimuth our current location to where our first point was. At this point I ask how we missed our second point, as they are all marked by little chem lights. Turns out Sergeant Chairforce had been resting the compass on the butt plate of his M16. We are now aware we are completely lost, and probably several clicks from anyone in our company. We have 3 more hours of the Nightland NAV course before the DSs will even begin to look for us. Decide we should head in a direction roughly opposite to the booby-trapped hill, as we don't want to encounter another mortar and all die. Tell Blackie to watch his fucking pace count this time. Hike for about 1 kilometer. Come to a misty clearing about 50 meters across with chest-high grass. Get about halfway through the field. Hear something, we stop. 4 non-humanoid figures rise out of the mist. We raise our useless blank-filled weapons. I have come to terms with my death. Suddenly they begin yelling. Drop your fucking weapons. Drop them now. We yell the same shit back, and also yell the challenge of the day. Realize we are both .mil and both sides lower our weapons. They approach us and talk to us, ask us why we are in this area, what unit we are with, who is our first line, etc. They are all wearing ghillie suits, face paint, and armed with cool as shit M4s with PEQ-15s, what look like thermal optics, and suppressors. One of them goes off to make a radio call. The other 3 stay with us, make small talk about how they remember basic, give us cigarettes because they remember Nick fiending. They also ask us if we've seen anything out of the ordinary, and they won't judge us if it seems weird or stupid. We mention the IED we fucking almost tripped on. They seem nonplussed, say to forget about it. Give us each a pack of smokes and repeatedly remind us to forget anything we saw out here. Convoy of 2 HMMWV arrives, 2 DSs each. Make us drive on the way back while they ride in the turrets/passenger seats. They tell us to keep our mouths shut about this. This incident is not mentioned by our DSs or anyone involved for the rest of my military career. That's the story of how I accidentally led my squad into a squad of special forces doing some real weird secret squirrel shit with IEDs in the middle of the woods in Missouri. I don't know if I got the feeling across very well, but I feel like the SOP 4 dudes were out looking for something, as they had live rounds and were setting gnarly booby traps.
Be me, 14 yo. Grandfather owns a massive ranch in down southern Utah passed down from his father or something. One day family decides to spend a week there. Hype AF because I loved outdoors shit and I get to see my cousins again. Fast forward to the trip. Have huge dinner with everyone. End up sleeping in the barn loft with cousins. Furnished room but still kinda strange, something just felt off with it. Only has 2 windows, one each end looking out towards the ranch house and the other facing the open desert. First few days are great, ride 4-wheelers, shoot guns and shit. One day the 4 of us ride off to an area on the property called the Flats by my cousins. Literal flat desert for as far as the eye could see, sparse vegetation dotted the landscape. While digging around we find an old, single-roomed burned-out cabin. A couple of us wanted to go inside but the oldest says no because it looks unsafe and could fall apart at any minute. Was already kinda dark so we decide to head back. Starts getting darker faster than we expected. Oldest decides we cut straight through the brush to get back quicker because when it gets dark out there. While trailblazing we come across a small clearing. Tiny ass clearing maybe 15 meters in diameter. Sun is almost under the horizon and you can barely make out anything. That's when we see it. Can only make out the shapes through the headlights. Small clearing has bones scattered all around it. Mental, wow, that's weird. Eventually find our way back to the house. Parents are pissed. Parents go with grandma off into town to pick up food and leave us with our grandpa. While sitting outdoors that night roasting marshmallows, we start telling him what happened. Apparently the burnt cabin was there on the property when his father bought it. One of my cousins asked him about the boneyard. What boneyard, he asks. I explained to him that we saw animal skulls and bones lying around in this spot. That's weird, he said, I'll check it out with your father tomorrow. His response wasn't reassuring and I was still creeped out from the whole thing. Lying in bed listening to the wind fly past the barn. Movement catches my eye in the window. There's a cat sitting on the windowsill staring into the loft. WTF, how did that get up here? Turn over and go to sleep. Wake up in the morning and the yard gets checked out. Grandpa finds his horse's bones in the clearing. Apparently my grandfather's horses kept disappearing a few years back and he sold the rest out of frustration. Grandpa, furious, calls the sheriff and they say they'll be over when they can. Bored, so I take a walk with one of my cousins and we're a good distance from everyone else. Casually chatting when we hear a noise like a safety whistle being blown. We stop and there is dead silence. No insects, nothing. Wait a few seconds and hear it again, a short high-pitched tweet from an emergency whistle. I want to go investigate but cousin tells me that we are the only ones on the property and the neighbors are all way too old to be out here. I insist but he just says anon, no, we're going back. Head back to grandpa and dad in the clearing. Sheriff said it was some animal. Grandpa calls bullshit but they can't do anything about it and just tells us to stay on watch for anything else. Tomorrow is the last day. Spend the rest of the day with cousins and we go back to sleep that night. Fucking cat is watching me again. That was almost 11 years ago and I still remember it vividly. Probably not as spooky as some of the other stories but was still very unnerving. Maybe I'll type it all out one day because I know the Greentext won't do it justice. I have kinda similar stories about being up north in the wilderness. If the thread is up tomorrow I'll type it out. Used to go visit grandpa up outside of Bozeman in the winters. Grandpa is this tiny little, frail old man, but he's hardy as fuck. He used to take us snowshoeing up in the mountains and carry most of the gear in the sled he pulled behind him. It was fucking cold up there, your snot would be frozen before it left your nose. The times he did convince us to go out, we ended up staying in ice caves that grandpa had carved into snow banks earlier in the winter. It got dark really early, and of course no campfires because ice and snow everywhere. One year we're out there camping with grandpa and he's really on edge the whole trip. Don't ask him why because we are stupid kids and don't think it matters. Random outbursts, yelling at us for not tying a knot right. Yelling at us for not keeping up with his insane pace. Stops hiking at about 2 p.m, nightfall isn't for another 3.5 hours. Me and brother exchange WTF? Looks with each other. Look around for his ice cave. There isn't one. Hey grandpa, where are we camping? Grandpa is nowhere to be found. Can't find his footprints, which is strange because snowshoes leave enormous footprints that you can't miss. Backtrack and refollow the trail to where we were earlier. Footprints just fucking end right where me and my brother were when grandpa told us to stop for the day. After a lot of deliberation, we decide to head back, following our tracks back to the main road, where we will somehow flag down a car and get help to find our grandpa. We hike about an hour back the way we came. Suddenly hear voice. Where the hell have you kids been? It's grandpa and he's pissed. Says he was hiking along and all next time he turned around, we weren't there. Says our footprints just ended about 100 paces back from wherever he was when he realized we were gone. We tell him something similar happened to us and we just got back from 2 miles ahead of us on the trail. Suddenly, he goes into wild animal hyper alert mode. Stops talking. Eyes scanning forest around us, head pivoting side to side, trying to see everywhere at once. Get freaked out and brother starts crying. Grandpa won't respond when we ask him what's wrong, quietly muttering incoherently to himself. After what seems like forever, Grandpa starts moving again. Simply says, "Follow me," and we do. Too scared to argue, but he's going in a third direction, i.e. not where we came from and not where we were originally headed. We are all hiking close together, literally stepping on each other's feet, can't hold hands because of ski poles, but we would have if we could have. Eventually emerge in a clearing. I recognize it as a lake, but you'd never know it in the winter when everything is frozen solid. We get out on the ice and walk all the way to the middle of the lake before we stop. Grandpa tells us to get out our parkas, as we're going to be staying a while. Ask him what's happening. Doesn't answer. He gets out binoculars and starts to scan the shoreline. This is a pretty huge lake, so without binoculars, neither me or my brother could really see anything besides little distant trees on the shore. At this point, Grandpa puts the binoculars down, unpacks a fairly large caliber revolver and holster, and puts it on his hip. He then picks the binoculars up and points them in the same direction he was looking a minute ago. Me and my brother both look in that direction. I can barely see something moving around. No, a couple things, all of various sizes. They're all hanging on the bank though, none of them leave the thick brush surrounding the lake, or venture onto the ice. After a few minutes, Grandpa silently hands me the binoculars. When I look at the movement on the shore, I almost shit my pants. There are 3 animals. 2 are what I can only assume are wolves. Maybe coyotes, but I don't think so, the bodies are just too long, almost snake-like. The third animal is some sort of all-white thing standing on 2 legs. The more I look at it, the stranger it seems. At first I took it to be a bear, just standing there on its hind legs. Then it starts walking, pacing around really, and the legs are just too long and slender to be a bear's. I sit down on the ice, lean up against my backpack, and get a more steady grip on the binoculars. Slowly realize that whatever it is has the approximate build of a human, but the head is clearly not a human head, some sort of animal, I can't place it. Ask Grandpa what the hell I'm looking at. Brother snatches binocs away and when he sees it, he labels it Bearman and wants to take a few shots at it. Grandpa says Indians used to dress up in animal furs in order to blend in with the animals they were hunting. Slightly stop shitting myself. It's just an Indian in a bearskin. And he has 2 dogs that look like wolves. And they're following us, but are afraid of ice. Start shitting my pants all over again as I realize that this is about 100 times weirder than a real bearman. It's starting to get dark, and we're still out there on the ice. We're all watching the Indian / bearman / whatever the fuck it is and his dog / wolf slowly wandering along the coastline, clearly avoiding the ice, but clearly trying to get out onto it somehow. Every once in a while, they'll change direction, as though they were pacing back and forth. In the time I have the binoculars, I see the thing, and his dog / wolves motionless and staring directly at us many times. No one breaks the silence for a long time. When it gets too dark to see anything on the shore, Grandpa relaxes, puts down the binoculars, and actually starts to make camp as though nothing had happened. Of course we don't have a tent, but we do have sleeping bags, and bivy bags to keep the blowing snow off of them, and the wind off our faces. Me and my brother look at him like he's crazy. We're going to sleep out here. I say something like, what about that guy? Holy shit, he's right over there. Doesn't matter, we spend a long night in that exact spot. Next morning, we can't locate any animals or bearmen after 45 minutes of scanning the trees around the lake. Grandpa deems it safe enough to head back by now, and since he knows these woods so well, we take a different route back to the main road than we took to get there. After 1 mile, he's doubling back, staring at mountain tops and measuring angles between them with his arms, and I'm convinced he's lost. In the next moment, several things happen all at once. With no warning, a huge moose gallops out of seemingly thin air and almost crushes my brother, managing to push him on the ground. Grandpa collapses for an unknown reason. The three of us form a triangle, and in the middle is a slender person covered in all white fur, like a polar bear, and with a bear head, or maybe a mask, but it looked pretty damn lifelike. The two wolves, I'm sure they're wolves now, are circling at a distance, or rather, one is circling, I don't see the other. Bearman lets loose a scream like you imagine Bigfoot might make when caught in a bear trap. Grandpa half sits up, points revolver, and fires off 3 shots at the thing in rapid succession. Huge puff of snow like a silent explosion, and can't see anything for a few seconds. Now a second moose goes hurtling through, and after it's gone and the snow has settled down, the bearman is gone too. No traces of blood to be found. Can still see the one wolf, pretty far away, but it's still circling. We proceed to book it out of the woods, taking the shortest and most direct route off the mountain. Think that Grandpa isn't really sure about where he's going, but nobody gives a shit, we have to keep moving. Still think I see the wolf out at the edge of my vision, several hundred feet out through the trees, or maybe it's both of them. We eventually do get back to Grandpa's car. Turns out he did know where he was going. It's been covered in fresh snowfall since we left it there. There's 10-inch paw prints all the fuck over it and around it. Nope. We clean off the snow and see that there are dents in the hood, like hail fell on it, but they're right under where the paw prints were. Nope.tar.gz.biz.nope. On the drive home, we all swear to never speak of this to Grandma or to my mom. Have to swerve out of the way of a huge roadkill. Almost drive off the road. Stop just in time. The thing in the road is a huge mound of fur with no distinct animal-like forms. No head, no legs, no tail. Blood everywhere. Looks like a giant skin thrown over a giant mound of flesh. It moves. Nope. Grandpa peels the fuck out, drives home 30 miles per hour over the speed limit, and we never look back.
Nothing amazing, but likely truer than the rest of the shit here. Land NAV training in northern Florida, Camp Blanding or something. Pitch black, groups of 4 together. Cotter driving on dirt paths on ATVs everywhere to check on us. Crickets and frogs chirping, night birds doing their usual night calls. Gets unusually louder. Gets so loud it starts to hurt, my buddies notice it too. Chirping goes for like 3 minutes, seems forever, we can barely talk to each other. Goes dead quiet in a snap, it's a relief, so we're more content than concerned. 5 minutes go by, we find a land NAV point, we notice it's still dead quiet. Buddy mentions it usually means a predator is around, we don't give a shit, we have red lens flashlights and rubber ducks, training M16s. Another buddy asks, do you hear that? Low grumbling / rolling R sound, notice we've heard it since the chirping stopped. Sounds like it's in our head and at different points around us simultaneously. Camp Blanding is in the middle of fucking nowhere, no machinery / buildings near the land nav point. We get concerned, not sure whether to continue on or go back to the SP, starting point. Talking back and forth for a few seconds, we then hear a bullhorn blast 3 times. Cotter announce over loudspeakers for all cadets to return to the SP immediately, double time it. We didn't give a shit and felt badass with our fake M16s, so we just half-assed jogged back. Along the way, flocks of birds are taking off in a panic all around us. Start to get concerned, so we start picking up the pace. After about 10 minutes of jogging, we see the floodlights of the SP, and multiple high-powered flashlights zooming around the SP. The entire time the Cotter were frantically ordering all cadets back to the SP. Each call more frantic than before, and increasing in frequency. We arrive, almost all lights on us. We're blinded and can't see. Here, that's them. Just 4, right? It's just 4? Count them. Should be 4. I don't see another, seriously concerned now. Rumbling sound behind us in the woods. Cotter tells us we're the last to arrive. Do a quick head count, we get in cattle trucks, newer deuce and a half. We take the fuck off, we left everything, including floodlights, tents, tables, vans, etc. at the SP. We drive back to the Hardball, main road, and continue at a fast pace to the staging area. Staging area has floodlights, we have to run guard shifts with stupid rubber ducks and a radio. Cotter does not fall asleep, stays awake till sunrise. Once sunrise hits we go back to the SP to get our equipment. Everything knocked out, tents flattened, a wooden table call aspied, maps in crumpled messes. We pack up quick per orders and start heading to the main part of post. Entire time cadets are anxious as fuck because we had no idea what was going on, everything was a frantic mess. Cotter seemed just as confused and nervous. As we're getting ready to head back south, the BC tells us we had to leave so fast because of an incoming thunderstorm. It was cloudy but no signs of rain, and it never did rain. I got scared shitless when I heard other cadets talking about a rumbling noise in the woods all around them, and in some cases in their head. Kinda a lackluster story, but it was just fucking weird, especially with the sound and how panicky all the Cotter were acting.
My personal encounter with the Ozark Howler. I'm not a fucking storyteller, so don't expect to get immersed. This isn't a fucking creepypasta. This is my account of a failed hunting trip with my uncle. B. December of last year. B. May, 18, 275 pounds, aspiring power lifter, heavy looking, not quite fat. My uncle had a kid a year ago, so he hasn't been working out in that time. He is still strong as fuck, he just has a gut from all that downtime. This guy is my fucking hero. Knows things about the woods that the gods must have taught him. Me and my uncle are staying with family in Mountain Home, Arkansas. Never been hunting out here. Pretty excited. Supposed to be elk out here. Don't have an elk tag, but fuck the game wardens. Get up at 3 a.m. to drive out as far as we can, walk about 15 miles into the mountains. So deep that the mountains block cell signals. I'm equipped with my SKS, pick related. I didn't have one of just my SKS, uncle has his Mosin. My uncle helps me get situated in my deer stand because he's already killed a deer this season and he wants me to kill one. End up so well situated that you would never find me if I didn't shine my phone's light at you. Sit in freezing temperatures all day and see jack shit. Uncle told me to wait on him to come get me from my blind. Starts getting dark. Okay Uncle Anon, you can hurry up now. He finally gets there and I'm already noped the fuck out. Round in the chamber, finger on the trigger because fuck trigger control. He is noped out as well. He says something was following him there from his climbing stand. As soon as he gets there, this weird smell fills the air. Think rotting meat mixed with fresh cut pomegranate. We still have a 3-hour walk ahead of us. Fuck.bmg. We start walking, smelling that weird smell the entire time. Starting to get used to it, my first mistake. About an hour in, we hear this loud ass howl that makes us immediately train our guns in that direction. Think of the noise a severely autistic gorilla would make if it was shot 3 times in the gut. We've been walking a while, so our eyes are pretty much used to the darkness by now. We can't see shit, but we are 1000% ready to shoot something. We say fuck it and start jogging back. We've been smelling this shit for the last hour. About 30 minutes go by. We hear the noise again. Cry of the autists. Webm. Fuck, conserving my flashlight's batteries, I wanna see what this thing is. I get out my pocket LED flashlight, turn it on and grab the front of my SKS with that same hand and point my gun along with the flashlight at the area the noise came from. I really don't like describing this thing, I don't even like remembering it. I'm nope the fuck just sitting here on my phone just remembering this shit. The image of the howler is burned into my memory, doubt I will ever forget it. It was less than 15 yards away. It was a grizzly bear-sized cat standing on all fours. About 5 feet tall at the shoulders. With fucking horns like a goddamn mountain ram or some shit. Shaggy ass dark hair. It had green eyes that are burned into my memory especially. It made the noise again and jumped at me and my uncle. We were so fucking noped after it howled at us that as soon as it even twitched at us I dumped my fucking mag into it and Uncle Anon was firing and racking the slide on his nugget as fast as he could. I don't know if we killed it because I didn't stick around for it. If we didn't kill it then it seriously shouldn't exist. Me and my uncle sprint all the way back to his truck and book it the fuck out of those woods. I still have 6 deer tags to fill and I don't know if I'll ever hunt again. My uncle sold his truck because of associated memories. He now drives a Chevy Sonic, fucking ew. If I can't get psychiatric help I won't make it through the year.
T's Friday night, and it's time for a/k/repeat thread. Original tales and screen caps welcome. Hunting coyotes with Dad. They're atop a small rocky outcropping at one end of a large field where the coyotes come. Both have AR-15s. Calling in the coyotes, hear them all around. Arrgh. 3 spooky 5 me man. First coyote comes into view at far end of field. Blat. Down it goes. Everything goes quiet for a while. Father and friend high-five and break out coffee while waiting for dog rats to return. Hear a rustling in the forest where the coyote was. Holy shit, 2 coyotes in 5 minutes. Rustling thing comes out of woods. That's no coyote. Full moon and clear sky so they can see pretty well. Some sort of golem-like figure shambling along on all fours. It goes to dead coyote. Looks around. Starts tearing into the corpse, eating it. Friend and Dad are more than a little concerned. Thing finishes eating. Looks around. With its teeth and one hand /claw thing it picks up the remains. Drags it off into the forest, shambling away at impossible speed. Friend and Dad spooked. Stay up all night. Go investigate at first light. Blood trail continues about 100 yards into the woods and abruptly ends. Friend and Dad get the fuck out of there. Running full tilt all the way back to the truck. Dad never gets over it, still avoids going into the woods alone. On the rare chances it's unavoidable he brings his Tokarev. Just in case. Tokarev. Lel. Be out in a woods. Skinwalker comes out of nowhere. Grab my trusty TT-33. Squeeze off a few rounds. Bullets fly off in random directions unrelated to where I was pointing the gun. Gun jams after 4 shots. Skinwalker shambles up to me. Whispers in my ear. Buy a 1911. Leans closer. Faggot. Skinwalker runs off into the woods howling, whoop 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 whoop. Sigh. Go home. Drink. Rethink life choices. Alright/x/ let me give you a story about something freaky that happened in Innawoods on a farm about 5 years ago. I was 17-year-old farm boy. Our place was about a mile from our nearest neighbor and 10 miles from the nearest town. My parents had taken a trip with my aunt to Vegas for a week and left me to run the place with the dogs. There had always been some weird stuff going on around the farm, animals going missing, animals turning up torn up, weird tracks etc. Dad and Grandpa always told me it was coyotes. But after I had gotten a bit older they had told me there had also been sightings of bobcats and mountain lions back in the area for the first time in over 50 years, but the DNR boys would never admit to it, even with trail cam footage of them. I had been talking nightly walks for a couple of years but never farther than the big lamplight would show. One night I start walking and go away from the farm and the light. It was a full moon and there was fresh snow on the ground. Everything was clear for miles and you could see like it was almost daylight. And something possessed my dumb ass to go out there in the middle of winter by myself. My dogs would usually come with me on little walks like this, but they were nowhere to be found. I figured they were out hunting little rodents or something, so I left without them. I walked the path along our empty cornfields and down the path that led to our pasture. It was about a quarter of a mile downhill walk. Down in this pasture there is a canyon and a creek that runs through the whole thing, from our end of the property all the way to the next county. Inside of this there is a pretty sizable forest with huge old trees all the way down. It was one of those places that was perfect to grow up near. I spent a lot of time down there throughout my life and never really had anything out of the ordinary happen. I had my headphones in and was listening to some hammer fall. just enjoying how cool everything was and how lit up everything seemed, even past the tree line. I figured me being just over 6 foot tall and an overly cocky weightlifter, I didn't have anything to worry about out there. So dumbass me went down next to the creek bed, in the middle of winter, alone and unarmed. Mistake number 1. I followed the creek for quite a ways until I ended up at a part of the bed where the banks and walls of this little canyon were too angled to climb up and there weren't any paths out. I stopped for a little bit and watched the moon and stars, just admiring it all. Don't think I'll ever forget how pretty everything was. About that time I ended up turning my music off just to take it all in. I guess it wasn't cold enough for the creek to freeze all the way, and every little sound out there in this place just echoed on top of the little sounds of the running water. The whole place just made every one of my scenes feel exaggerated. I stood there for about a minute or two when I started to get this horrible feeling in the pit of my gut, like the most terrible thing in the world was going to happen at any second. I looked around a bit, didn't want to freak myself out over nothing, so I gave it a short time. That was mistake number 2. I should have just walked out of there. At this point I started to hear something moving through the snow and brush on the other side of the creek. I'm pretty sure if it had been any other time or place I wouldn't have noticed it. It was so damn quiet besides that little trickle of water. I started to look around and spotted a little bit of brush moving a few yards from the side of the creek bed. The only sounds were those exaggeratedly amped up steps causing the thin coat of ice to crack and snap on the long grass near the shore. I won't lie. Every horror story and terrible thing I've ever heard about run through my head, and I ended up just being stuck there, unable to move away while this thing continued to creep out along the bank. I hadn't even seen it and suddenly I just had the worst fear I had ever had in my life to this day. Finally this thing came out, and by God I almost pissed myself. This big black dog looking thing came crawling out near the creek on all fours. It was so big I don't know how the hell it had moved so quietly. It kept walking along in the open before it stuck its muzzle down in the creek and started to drink. I just stood there glued to the spot. The whole place seemed to get darker with every second. About this time I felt the cold for the first time that night while this chill ran down my spine. Stupid me shivered. Mistake number 3. I had big copper buttons on my coat, and a couple of them brushed against each other. It had to be such an insignificant sound, but down there, it seemed like I had hit a tin roof with a hammer. This thing perked its ears up and raised its head to look at me. Got its eyes. I've never seen anything that green before. We stared each other down for a few moments and then this thing growled. About this point I finally snapped out of it and began to back away, trying to get back out of this boxed-in space and away from this thing. This thing started to bare its teeth and growl more aggressively, and then I shit you not, it stood up on its hind legs a bit, raising its front paws up to its sides, only they weren't paws, they were like hands. I thought I was going crazy or something, but I kept slowly backing off, every step getting me a little closer to the path leading out of the canyon and creek, but even then I still had a long way back to the house. This thing just kept watching me like it wanted me to just back away and leave for the first few steps. Then it started walking along the other side of the creek matching my pace, just slowly stalking me out. I was shitting my pants and breathing heavily but somehow managed not to lose my head and run. I think if I had done that I wouldn't have made it out. Finally I made it to the open area, just had to get up this little hill then make it across the pasture. Then it was only a quarter of a mile up another hill to home. I didn't turn my back on this thing and continued to back my way out and up the hill. This thing didn't seem to want to cross over the creek from the position it was at, but it kept walking. About the time I made it to the top and was looking down at this dogman thing, it had made it to a more shallow spot down at the creek bed and began to cross. At this point I knew I had to pick up the pace. I finally turned and began to quickly walk to the pasture gate as quickly as I could. I scrambled over the gate and looked back again. It was at the top on all fours again, still watching me with those eyes and teeth. All that was between me and this thing was a barbed wire fence, a panel gate, and 20 yards. That's when I heard the best sounds I've ever heard in my life. Loud padding coming across the field. All 3 of my dogs were coming full speed down the hill raising hell. I looked back and this thing turned and stalked back down the smaller hill. I figured I was in the clear and took off like a fucking rocket. I ran a quarter mile in nearly 4 inches of snow in winter gear. I passed my dogs on the way up, and they didn't stop or turn to meet me. They just bolted down the way after this thing. What felt like an hour of running up this hill I made it back to my home, and almost passed out on the floor. I locked the doors and ran to grab something to defend myself. I figured that my hunting knives weren't going to cut it, so I went to the gun safe. Only guns in house are great-granddad's old double-barrel 20-gauge, a 22 and an old pump-action Remington 30-06 pump-action with a box 40-year-old ammo that had a horrible jamming problem. I grabbed the shotgun and loaded 2 shells before shoving a couple of fistfuls into my pockets. I just sat there in the kitchen with a death grip on this gun for hours before I finally heard my dogs barking outside the house. I looked out the window onto the porch and saw all 3 of them without a scratch. I dropped down onto my ass and cried like a child, not sure what to think. I didn't want to go out there again. And I didn't until the next morning. I stumbled out the door with the gun and looked around. My boys came up panting with their tails wagging, and I loved on them and petted them until my body was numb from cold. I made sure they got some hot meat that night as a thank you. I've seen this thing a few more times than this, but this was the first time. The only people who know about this are a couple of my closest friends. Hell of a story. I don't live on the farm anymore at the moment, but that thing turned what was my little retreat into a nightmare. Thread to see if anyone has heard of / seen similar events of the past week. Colorado. Front Range of the Rockies. Be me. Be at a graduation party, with brothers, and GF. GF is main character of this story. Circa 11 p.m., outside of friend's house, which in the middle of a heavily wooded area. Hanging out with the brothers, talk gets rowdy and sexual. GF leaves in mild disgust, boys will be boys type reaction. A couple minutes later the guys leave, and I head back into the house to find GF. No GF. I go to the porch and call out for her into the woods. Silence. A couple moments later I hear her blood-curdling scream and she comes running out of the darkness. Anon, I saw a little candlelight in the woods and I followed it to see what it was, and I think I saw a bear. Me, you should never follow strange lights into the woods, you never know where they might lead. Her, but the lights were so pretty. I want to know what they are. Me, yeah, don't. Next day, nightfall, we're in our respective homes, approximate 50 miles away. We're texting. She says, I see a floating light again. Wait, now there's more than one. Me, just don't leave your house, okay? Running through my head are stories of will-o'-the-wisps and corpse candles and the paranormal equivalent of an anglerfish. Her, but they're so lovely, I really want to know what they are. Me, please don't follow them, it's not a good idea to go out into the woods alone at night. Her, don't worry, I'm just on my back porch watching them. I'm like, okay, just stay safe. Leave for a bit to play them dank video games. Get a text an hour later saying basically, now that you're asleep and can't worry about me, I'm going to go investigate those lights. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Bitch what.jpg. To be continued. Photo she took of the lights outside of her house. I start texting her asking her what's going on, asking her to go back inside, telling her to be safe, etc. She texts me back, shitting herself, utterly scared out of her mind. Her, anon, I chased the strange lights out into the woods, and out in the darkness I saw a huge thing that was too big to be a person but was walking on its hind legs. Me, actively questioning what kind of woman I'm dating. Why did you go out there? That was really dangerous, and whatever you saw could be life-threatening. She's mortified and profusely apologizing for being so stupid. Literally the next night, and coincidentally tonight, we're taking on the phone after I get off work, and I'm trying to get her to promise me that she won't go chasing those lights again. For some reason she becomes stubborn and won't promise that she'll stay inside that night. She's home alone, house on the edge of the woods, there's no moon, and it's snowing. She still won't fucking promise to stay inside. We get into a fight, she gets upset, drinks a margarita. She's a lightweight, so she gets tipsy immediately. Still won't promise to stay inside. We're still arguing when suddenly she goes quiet. Whispering, anon, that thing is outside my house right now. I can see its silhouette and I can hear it walking. Suppressed_I_ told you so.jpg. She starts losing her shit and freaking out, and I'm trying to in the very least keep her calm. She's literally watching something pacing outside her window. Then she sees the lights again. She decides to stop looking out the window. She stays huddled and still in her living room until enough time passes after she sees this unknown entity. She moves to her bedroom and falls asleep. I'm left awake researching and green texting and somewhat bothered by the whole ordeal. What could this be? There are hundreds of stories of orbs in the woods, but the details and the way she described the lights aligns most closely with Old Welsh and English stories of corpse candles. Without telling her my suspicions, I asked her details about her situation. My findings. GFS strange lights. Small. Mobile. Orange, blue, and white. Leading into the woods in the direction of a cemetery. Corpse candles. Small. Mobile. Orange, blue, and white. Float around the dwelling of someone who's dying. Float back and forth from their house to their future grave. Link to main website of info I found, http://www.legendarydartmoor.co.uk/corpse_candles.htm. Now I'm beginning to become concerned. This may possibly explain the lights, but what about the humanoid entity outside her house? Tomorrow night I'm going over to spend the evening with her. We'll post updates if anything happens. Advice please, /x/. Details I forgot. Her neighbor's dogs were freaking out last night. In the fresh snow this morning she found footprints circling her house and back porch coming from the woods. Tonight during the one can see it outside phase, her cats were very agitated and disturbed, hackles raised, and whatnot. Investigate that shit, get a gun. If you can't get a gun, get the sharpest and longest knife you have. Also, instead of going to her house, ask her to come to yours to be safer. If you see the humanoid entity, fight or flight. Stay safe. OP. Goddamn dude, your girlfriend is stupid. Please let her know how absolutely moronic and dangerous it is to follow lights into the woods, no matter how pretty they are. It very likely was will-o-wisps, they love to lead people to their death. I'm literally angry for you, OP. Also, everything that happens now is 100% her fault. She is a stupid bitch for not heeding your warnings, and I want you to let her know this even if it causes you to get into a fight over it. Also surprised she didn't get fucking wrecked the first time she followed the lights, let alone 3 goddamn times. Update. OP is not kill. Yes, GF is stupid. Last night was uneventful. I'm visiting tonight to hang out and see what there is to see. OP is an armed/K/fag, don't worry. What are you taking with you as far as weaponry? Shotgun or rifle, I trust. Also, good luck, friend. OP's Rafu, Remington 870 Tactical. Here's hoping you don't actually need it in this situation. That's a big gun, Disa. To be fair to people calling her stupid, if it's corpse candles, she's probably dying regardless of this whole incident. They appear to people who are dying, not people they are killing. They appear inviting because they lead you to the eternal peace that will envelope you soon. It's a mental phenomenon beyond control. It's possible she has cancer or some other terminal illness that has gone unnoticed. I feel incredibly sorry for her. Though, the tall creature may indicate something other than a terminal illness. It may be a terminal condition of a more paranormal variety. It's possible that the tall figure and the corpse candles are actually two irrelevant though interrelated incidents. This tall figure is stalking her. Perhaps it kills slowly, but is practically guaranteed. Thus, the corpse candles appear to her. If that's not the explanation, I have no idea how the fuck the two things relate. I suggest you expand your search beyond the lights and do more research on whatever this figure is. That is the real problem here. You can consider the corpse candles more of a warning than anything else. Assuming OP is not already kill. She's home alone, house on the edge of the woods, there's no moon, and it's snowing and that's where you're wrong, OP. It snowed in the Front Range yesterday and the day before, but it didn't today. Thread is a day old. Never mind. I'm literally retarded. Retard here. Yeah, bring us along. The fact that actually lines up perfectly makes this even better. Either OP is serious, which still doesn't prove spoops, but proves that the GF is having some manner of problem, Or he's at least doing research / making sure this story is belly, so thank you for posting this either way. I really look forward to hearing more from this now. Again, assuming something horrible didn't actually happen. Denver resident here, I'd love to investigate if you are willing to give more details on the sauce. I'm in Denver. Evening all, up here. It's been a very eventful night. Chapter 5-ish. It's definitely not corpse candles / GF might not be quite as stupid as we've thought. Earlier this evening, I'm at her house. It's getting late and we're chilling / snuggling, and then as I'm half asleep she gets up and goes downstairs. I groggily get up and follow a few minutes later to see why she left. When I walk in she has the aura of guilty / hiding something. I try to get her to talk, but she's insistent that I'm fine and it's nothing, not really abnormal as anyone with a girlfriend knows. She tells me to go back upstairs and go to sleep. I'm like whatever, and I go up and lay back down. Less than a minute later I bolt upright because I hear the ding from the security system indicating that someone has opened a door. Hear the back sliding door slam shut. Pause for effect, to be continued immediately. Side comment to the dude from Denver. This is in the Woodland Park / Divide / Rampart Reservoir area. Your ass may have been dry and warm, but it was snowing that night up in the mountains. This is when shit got creepy. I rush outside and call out to her, with no response. It's pitch black out, but I walk into the backyard with my flashlight. She couldn't have gone far. Through the light wind, I can hear dogs barking, normal, and something that sent fucking class A chills down my spine. As cliche as it sounds, I heard the voice of a child off in the distance saying help over and over in the exact same tone every time. Not very urgent, not very loud, almost like a statement rather than an exclamation or a cry for aid. Then my GF pops up from the other side of the back porch deck and asks if I can hear a howling noise. MFW, there's not only a creepy ass child's voice but also apparently she's hearing howls. I get her back inside, and she tells me she saw the lights again. For the next hour I'm trying to convince her what a stupid idea following those lights is, and she just doesn't get it. She's a smart girl, good in uni, does astronomy and microbiology as hobbies. She has common sense blind spots, but she's logically sound. Nevertheless, she cannot seem to wrap her head around why chasing these lights is dangerous. She keeps insisting that I have to find out what the lights are. I have to. I'm fine with investigating, just not running blindly into the night with a bathrobe. I'm trying to convince her to investigate it in an intelligent manner, but she keeps insisting that the only way to find out what the lights are is to chase after them alone. Apparently the lights disappear when other people are around. Ever since she acted suspiciously when she went downstairs by herself, she's acted very strange, not at all like she normally does. So for at least an hour I'm begging her to promise to not chase the lights when I leave. She just refuses. She'll barely respond, and eventually she is just staring and it seems like she's unable to acknowledge me. Like her consciousness has disconnected. She finally concedes to promise. At this point she's barely talking at all, not normal, and she had about 4 to 5 episodes of her just staring blankly and not blinking for around a minute each. You know when someone is woken suddenly and they jolt and gasp a little? Well, she was doing that out of the blank stares, but she wasn't asleep. By now I'm getting more worried and disturbed. We're both religious, so I pray for her. Atheists, I'm aware you consider me a moron, don't waste the energy to type it. Immediately after the prayer she starts totally responding again. I'm surprised, and I start asking her questions about what had just happened because I'm still confused. It becomes apparent that she can't remember a single thing from the point when she saw the lights, and the end of the prayer. She also suddenly has a splitting headache. As I recount everything she becomes more and more horrified. She didn't know she had chased the lights outside. She had no memory of any of it. She's feeling all right now, but we're growing concerned that these lights may have an effect on one's mental state. The lights and entity are an angler fish, and she's the mesmerized minnow. Also, I'm looking into the Orthodox Catholic Church's concept of demonic obsession, which is when a demon harasses someone, rather than possessing them. What do? Summit County Ski Resort bitch reporting. Shit, I've been gone for a month and it's still fucking snowing? What kind of mud season is this? Has this been happening the last couple years? This is in the Woodland Park / Divide / Rampart Reservoir area. OP is a massive hick, goddamn. This sounds familiar. The lights and entity are an angler fish, and she's the mesmerized minnow. The entity itself might not be a lure. The voice in the darkness sure as fuck was, as are the lights, but advise getting some incendiary ammo for your shotgun. Shit from Innawoods often does not appreciate fire. However, if you suspect this thing is not baryonic, but demonic / ethereal in nature, your weapons are of little to no use. Beeline it straight for your nearest church in that case, with GF, and tell the pastor they're everything. If you're not ARPing OP, get some fat cedar and bum that the next time you see the lights or the entity. You said you pray, so do that when you light the cedar. I have no idea what that is, but the way you described the voice makes me think it's a spirit. They all sound high-pitched like kids, and the colored orbs are what spirits often look like, usually in the colors you mentioned but red instead of orange. If you have native friends that are active in their traditions, then have a chat with them as well, but the flat cedar should do the trick. As far as I'm aware, demonic obsession is just a path to possession. You have to weaken the psyche before you can take hold of it. If it was just her seeing / hearing these things, I'd say it's definitely a demon, since they are metaphysical and exist in the mind. But the fact that you heard something too makes me think it's something else. I've no idea what. If it is a demon and it's able to reach to both of you, that probably means it's already in something. It having a physical form is enabling it to reach out to multiple minds. But it sounds as if its physical form is weak and likely immobile. Perhaps it's been sealed away in a tree. And it keeps trying to lure your GF to the tree. If you're a courageous psychopath, you could go into the woods and see if you find any tree with some manner of native signs of runes on it. Or you could just get her out of that house. If it's immobile, getting away from those woods would probably do the trick. Incendiary. Innawoods. That's never a good idea. An anon earlier had the idea to bless the shells and gun. I'd go with that. If it can feel incendiary rounds, it sure as fuck can feel normal rounds, blessed or otherwise. Are you goddamn retarded? I told you this at the beginning of the thread, days ago. Can you not read? Will. Oh. Wisp. Ignore, do not follow. Shit fucking goddamn, I literally don't have a reaction pick strong enough. Also, a more correct definition of what's going on: they are not inherently dangerous, but they have the ability to charm you into following them to something dangerous, usually a fey portal or some shit, but apparently they can lure you to skinwalkers now. I'm not joking when I say, slap some literal sense into your GF please. Ever since she acted suspiciously when she went downstairs by herself, she's acted very strange, not at all like she normally does. Skinwalker. OP is dead. I agree, they want a full course meal instead of a light dinner. Anyways, Op, if you're still alive, I want you to know that I'm only pissed at you because I want both you and your GF to survive, and you're actively disregarding all the warnings we've given you. It's obvious to me now that your GF has an extremely weak will, and is put into a trance when she sees the lights. I'm going to ask my friend for some sort of charm you can make that could help her not be so easily controlled. Hold on a few. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit. OP is actually dead, guys. I checked the news locally and there is a murder investigation going on since yesterday. http://www.krdo.com/news/death-investigation-under-way-cost/513650463. This is suspicious, though to be fair, Front Range of the Rockies is 80% of the state population. Plus, there's murders all the time. It's been a war zone since they legalized the weed and the reefer madness has taken over. Nah dude, you don't get it. He said that he was near the Woodland Park area and this post OP has been missing for 2 days, and now there is a death investigation ongoing since yesterday in Gold Kemp Road, which is 20 miles from where OP said he would be, as seen in my previous post. Which I checked out on Google Maps is basically some sketchy road in Innawoods. This isn't a coincidence. Right now few details are known other than it could be a bike accident. They didn't mention anything about murder. Bump. Re-OP's dead. We warned him, dumbass. Thinking he knows better. I second you, Anon. LMAO told him he should get a gun. Gold Kemp Road. Lovely. Colorado Anon here, Gold Kemp Road is hella haunted. http://www.atlasobscura.com/places/gold-kemp-road-tunnels. All sorts of stories about voices and lights in the old train tunnels and stories of, wait for it, supposed Satanists wandering around at night with torches. For latecomers to the thread, OP was killed by a demon motorcycle headlight. His GF rode off on the bike and is now getting the party at Sturgis started early. Oh, forgot to mention, one of the other reports, and I think the third tunnel is the voices and laughter of children, which OP also mentioned. All of this is around an area called Helen Hunt Falls, which is also stupid haunted, and just down the road from Manitou Springs, which besides being a sort of vortex area for the New Agers, is, you guessed it, haunted as all shit, including stories of its own personal town demon. And more weird, witchy and unexplained murders than you can shake a stick at. Welcome to Colorado Springs. Doesn't matter whether OP did or not. Is telling us there's a recent death up there on Gold Camp, so this thread is now interesting either way. Damn, this is the most interesting thing to happen here for months. RIP OP. I'm here in Arvada. I live about 15 minutes away from Flatirons Mall, and let Maine tell you the drive there and back at night is seriously spoopy. I have a story if you're interested. Pick of one of my chickens, I guess. Arvada. S. What's the story though? I would like to hear your story. Bump, OP please come back. Also, dump the girl if you're still alive. I technically live in unincorporated Jefferson County. Like I live on Indiana Street. If you're from around here you know what I'm talking about. Anyways. Me and my brother are coming home from seeing Get Out at Flatirons and it's about 12:45 a.m. not super late but the road is deserted. We are just listening to 93.3 and talking about guns when like 3 or 4 deer jump out in front of my truck. I swerve and luckily miss them. We are a bit dazed and we decided to pull over and switch seats for the rest of the way home. As we are about to do this, my brother sees a human silhouette and slams the door and draws his pistol, USP-9C. We both are avid/K/browsers, so we immediately think Skinwalker. Just peel out and go home at like 70 miles per hour. That's it, we didn't want to fuck around with that stuff, so we just went home. I will never drive there alone at night. I'm near Morrison and have been seeing a lot of UFOs lately. Mean we're close to an airbase, so it's possibly weird military aircraft I'm not familiar with, but weird teleporting lights and a stationary aircraft that then zips around in a square don't seem like military stuff to me. More Colorado stories please. Anyway, as far as what she's seeing, could be she's seeing whatever entity causes those lights normally, or it was an unrelated entity drawn to the lights. If the lights are for your girlfriend, then it would explain how it found her house. Perhaps you should have her spend a few nights at your place and on. See if the sightings go away if she stays away from home for a while. Also, you're basically dating an adult infant dude, might wanna rethink your relationship once she's safe. Who over the age of 8 thinks I'm going to go chase pretty lights in the dark woods alone? I'm not even from Colorado and I know that's a retarded idea. Even if you don't believe in the paranormal, there's still fucking wild animals and maybe a crazy opportunist out there. Buy your girlfriend some mace, dude, she's too stupid to be left alone unarmed, ever. Crime went down after weed got legal, nigga, you went full retard on that one. Fuck, I live on the road to Morrison and that road is spooky as fuck at night, almost no lights unless you're near one of the stoplights and that big spooky cross on the mountain looking down at you. I'm always petrified I'm going to see something when I have to drive there at night. This is also me, I'm a fucking retard and didn't realize the thread was as long as it was before I commented, so I ended up not reading the thread before posting. I am LE dipshit. Hope OP isn't really kill though, damn. More Colorado spoopa stories though? Please? And all this shit is going down a few clicks away from NORAD? Yepers, not even clicks hardly, it's basically right at the foot of Cheyenne Mountain. If NORAD is not lousy with ghosts too, I'd be shocked. I'm surprised nobody from here has contacted the local police. Maybe someone has, but they're too much of a pussy to tell us. First thing they'd ask is for OP's name, which we don't know. Yes, hello local police. My Tibetan throat singing forum's special ghost story board said that somebody did something in this approximate 6,000 hectare area. Could you look into it? Zero death by demon GF. Real quick. Holy shit. Damn, this thread's still going strong. Bumperino in hopes that OP comes back one day. Archivist, and the OP was never heard from again.